It's early June. 6 weeks ago, after a long Greenland winter, the ice relinquished its hold on the Dagmar Orn. The bay on the West Greenland coast was frozen for only 2 months this year. That's a lot shorter than in previous years. The ship slowly awakens from its torpor. The Dagmar Orn is an octogenarian made famous by Arvid Fuchs. He's been her master since 1988 and has taken her on many expeditions all over the world. Arvid Fuchs arrived from Germany today. Friends and crew members looked after the ship during the Arctic winter night.
Juni 2010.
1st of June 2010. Back on board at last. It's 2 months since my last visit. Going alongside, stepping on board is like coming home. And the Dagmar Orn is our home. It's much more than just a vehicle for getting from one place to another. It's a symbol of our philosophy, of an alternative way of life, despite all the professionalism that operating a ship like this requires. The crew and the ship together form a dedicated community. That's why people keep coming back, sanding and painting in the cold and damp until their fingers are raw. They don't do it for me, they do it for the Dagmar Orn. Our missions directly impact on the condition of the ship, so the ship gives back what we need most in these rough Arctic waters: safety and a strong sense of security.
Und ein starkes Gefühl der Geborgenheit.
Achim Karpus is one of the 5 men on board.
I don't know what lies ahead. I've never planned my life. I've pretty much left everything to chance, just help things along now and again. And that's how I see this trip. I'm looking forward to it, but I don't have any particular expectations. We'll just see what happens.
The ship owes its new coat of paint to Uli Vai. He knows the far north from earlier trips.
What's going to make the tour special, of course, is the fact that it's in an area that really appeals to me, far up in the north, where you really feel like an outsider and you have to keep a very close eye on the weather and nature, because if you don't, you won't have the chance of getting home alive. I like that challenge. It's fun.
Team member number 4, Brent Body, collecting drift ice for drinking water. Icebergs are fragments of glaciers, so they're made from fresh water. A risky job. The floating giants are easily unbalanced. Brent comes from the north of Canada.
For 25 years I'd been kayaking all over the Arctic, so I was very used to being out in the cold and camping and being in the elements in the Arctic conditions. So I was very comfortable in that environment. It was just the sailing part of it, the technical sailing. Well, I like this boat. I really sleep well on it. I really get a good feeling for it. I've been through some big storms and she always pulls through the big waves safely, and I'm very happy to be on here.
Loading up provisions, mostly packet food, for use when the sea is rough or there's no more fresh food on board. The stock of rum has to last for 4 months. Diving to check the ship's hull, not Captain Arvid Fuchs's idea of fun. The Max Planck Meteorology Institute had a monitoring station in the bay. The equipment is now being removed. The meteorologists came here to study the effects of global warming. The fact that average temperatures have surged has long been established. Arvid Fuchs can also confirm the changes from decades of personal observation.
About 10 years ago, before there was an airport here, planes used to land in this sound on the ice. That's inconceivable today, because the sound barely freezes over. And even when it does, the ice is only 15 to 30 centimeters thick, which is a lot less than a few decades ago. And if you ask around in Greenland, you'll hear the same story over and over again. The ice comes later, it melts earlier, and it's nowhere near as thick as it used to be.
Casting off and hoisting the anchor, all set for the first leg of the journey, a 2-hour trip to Upernavik.
Juni
3rd of June 2010. It's a great feeling starting up the engine and gradually releasing the landlines that have held the ship in position since October last year. It's a huge relief. There are always risks to overwintering in an exposed place. I don't like leaving the ship behind. I feel a kind of phantom pain all the time I'm at home. The Dagmar On is always in my thoughts. Today, on the 3rd of June, her hibernation is finally over. We're slowly gliding out of the bay at the start of our long journey south. In the age of the air travel, it may seem an anachronism to face the dangers and discomforts of a sea voyage like this in an old sailing boat. But those on board find the ship's slow progress deeply satisfying. The experience of nature is particularly intense. And then there's the experience of being members of a team. We live and work here on board in incredibly cramped conditions. The ship is a working vessel, not a yacht. Outside the berth, there's no private space. We share just about everything: the ship, the resources, the experience of nature, but also the worries and hardships of a critical voyage through ice and stormy weather. Even so, does it really make sense to travel like this? Anyone who asks that question will never understand.
Arriving at Upernavik, one of the few towns on the thinly populated west coast of Greenland. "1,200 people live here." The modern world meets tradition. Fishing for the international market is the town's main source of income, but the old custom of hunting with sled dogs for seals and polar bears is still very much alive. Now in midsummer, daylight extends right through the night. In November, it's dark all the time. The winter night lasts for 2 months in Upernavik. In the port, the Dagmar On refuels. Diesel and fresh water are bunkered for the long trip to Newfoundland. And the crates belonging to the Max Planck Institute are unloaded. They'll be flown from here to Germany. Meanwhile, Peter Fleischer checks over the ship's engine. The 3-cylinder diesel is extremely reliable. It was made in Denmark, where the Dagmar On was also built, originally as a fishing cutter.
I like travelling, and I prefer to work my passage by doing a few repairs or a bit of maintenance. I'm not really one for sitting on a sun deck and just looking at the landscape. I want to help keep the boat running and in good condition. And you can't do that in the kind of 2 or 3 week holiday that other people take. So that's not for me.
This particular motor, I just love the sound of it. It's a 3-cylinder. I call it the pickety-pockety because that's kind of the sound it makes when it's going slow, and then when it goes a little faster, it's rickety-rockety.
The real journey starts at last. From here, it's 1,400 nautical miles, 2,500 kilometers, to the northern tip of Newfoundland. They'll be travelling day and night for the next 17 days. The watch changes every 4 hours, the crew always working in pairs. A close eye needs to be kept on the water because there's lots of drift ice around. Achim's equipment tells him it's a mild 6 degrees today. A 6th crew member came on board at Upernavik. Reimer Fuhlendorf is a chef. Having no fresh ingredients, he can't demonstrate his skills just yet. On the menu today is Balkan rice pilaf, out of a packet. While the others eat, Reimer and engine operator Peter will keep watch on deck. There's not yet enough wind to use the sails. The tireless diesel engine propels the ship through the icy water at 6 knots, around 11 kilometers an hour. Brent, now on lookout duty in the bows, warns the helmsman of any icebergs ahead. Arvid checks the course on a sea chart.
The Dagmar Orn looks like a traditional fishing boat and handles like one as well. But down here in the navigation area, it's really high-tech. I don't see anything incongruous about that. It simply makes the ship safer. We're in lonely waters here, so we need to take every opportunity to download weather reports, ice charts, and so on. We're on our own out here, and if anything happened, no one could come to our assistance. The Dagmar Orn is a nice boat, incredibly seaworthy and good in ice, so I see nothing inappropriate about installing high-tech equipment on a traditionally built ship. It's simply a sensible, contemporary way of keeping an 80-year-old vessel operating.
Shortly before midnight on the 15th day out of Upernavik, Peter Fleischer prepares to take over the watch. Coffee helps the watchkeepers through the worst time on deck, from midnight to 4 a.m. At night, no one is allowed on deck without a life vest and safety harness, even when it's fairly calm and dry, like tonight. Next morning, perfect sailing weather. With a good wind, the Dagmar Orn reaches its top speed, 9 knots, around 16 kilometers an hour. 75 tons mass makes her comparatively slow, but extremely robust and storm-proof. On the 16th day at sea, the Canadian coast comes into view.
24. Juni 2010.
24th of June 2010. Sailors speak of landfall when they first sight the silhouette of a sea coast on the distant horizon. It then takes many hours before they reach port, but when land has been sighted, it feels as if the voyage is over. Travelling along the coast of Newfoundland is a totally different experience from our polar sea expeditions. Some, this summer, even likened it to a sailing holiday in the Baltic. Anyone who thinks that knows nothing about the climatic conditions of this area. Dense fog, icebergs, ice floes and changeable strong winds make it a very challenging place for sailing. This is still the North Atlantic, and this is anything but a Baltic cruise. But I don't make these trips in order to live dangerously. I want to know what's over the horizon. My drive stems from an interest in foreign countries, cultures, landscapes, and the issues that affect them. And they don't all need to be in the polar seas.
Besonders auf die Themen, die sich mit ihnen verbinden. Und die müssen nicht zwangsläufig im Eismeer liegen.
The northern tip of Newfoundland, where a vessel heading due south from Greenland first sights the North American coastline. 1,000 years ago, Vikings arrived here by the same route. In the 1960s, archaeologists found the remains of a Viking village here, evidence of an astonishing feat of seamanship. The Norsemen crossed the icy North Atlantic in open boats without a compass. Today, most people in Newfoundland live from the sea, or at least hunt and fish in their free time. Kevin Young is no exception. He works as a historian and tour guide at the Viking archaeological sites.
Living in Newfoundland is a bit of a treat, you know, but it's got its hardships too. I mean, there's a lot of Newfoundlanders, not like a lot of other people, very resourceful people, and we wear many hats, meaning you can do one thing or another. We're pretty handy folk, and that's what it all comes down to. I think living on an island, you have to be, fairly resourceful and independent. Everybody knows their own neighbor around here too, so that makes it a lot more comfortable. And winter time, we spend a lot of time in the country, snowmobiling and ice fishing, stuff like that. Of course, there's always hunting and stuff like that to do in the fall of the year as well. So we really enjoy ourselves as best we can.
Arvid Fuchs had contacted Kevin Young and informed him about the group's arrival. 17 days after leaving Upernavik, the Dagmar Orn reaches the Newfoundland coast on schedule.
A lot of very interesting sailors coming to our shores here for sure. A lot of world explorers and things like that come here. This was a hub for the Norse people 1,000 years ago, and French fishermen, French sailors, English fishermen, English sailors. This has been a jumping off point for Arctic expeditions come through here.
The Dagmar Orn anchors in a bay. There's no jetty here with water deep enough for her to moor. Some of the crew go ashore in the dinghy. The rest keep anchor watch.
Just flip it around. Yeah, thanks. There you go.
Back on dry land after more than 2 weeks at sea.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Good to see you folks. Good to see
Hi,
you.
how are you? Good to see you guys.
Hi, I'm Arvid. Hi,
There you go.
nice
Good
to meet
you,
you.
Arvid. How are you?
Good,
How was your trip? Good?
good so far, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Lots
Really
of
good.
ice and stuff?
Yeah, up in the north,
great.
but now we're very lucky with the weather, I
Oh,
guess.
my goodness. A
But, yeah.
beautiful day like this,
Yeah.
I tell you. It's something else. You're very fortunate indeed. And it's so good to see you, folks. Absolutely
Thank you.
so good to see
Thank
you.
you.
For Reimer Fuhlendorf, the 1,400-mile trip was the first experience of a long voyage under sail.
I'm not really used to all the movement. The boat gets thrown about quite a bit. There were so many cross seas that anyone in the berth was constantly jolted back and forth. That made it difficult to sleep. And after 3-4 days with too little sleep, the old brain gets a bit foggy.
Dann wird das auch schon ein bisschen hart am Kopf.
The Vikings were the first Europeans in America, long before Columbus. They sailed from Greenland and came looking for an easier place to live. They called the new shores Vinland, meaning meadow or pasture land, a sign of their hopes of a warmer climate. Taking the same route as Arvid Fuchs and his crew, the Vikings crossed the dangerous North Atlantic, sailing for weeks without knowing if they would ever sight land.
The distance the Vikings covered is astonishing enough. Even more impressive, though, is the fact that they covered it in waters like this. The area is prone to pack ice and icebergs, strong currents and extremely severe storms. They survived them all and arrived safely, although not all of them will have made it. They're sure to have suffered heavy losses en route. But one thing is certain, they must have been good sailors. I have a lot of admiration for them.
Archaeologists have reconstructed a number of Viking buildings.
But we've seen fit to over the years. The proof of the Norse culture or the Norse settlement would have been proven by the fact that they found iron on site, and of course the process of working iron, it was something that was unknown to the natives of North America, and it was only something that the Norse people would have been actually getting into. So this is this house is a replica of one that we found on site.
Inside the buildings, visitors get an idea of the Vikings' way of life. The complex is known as Longso Meadow and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So far, it's the only known Viking settlement on American soil. Up to 50 people would have gathered in a hut like this, seeking shelter from the cold and incessant rain, and safety from attacks by hostile Indians. But at some point they gave up. Their hopes of a better life in Vinland failed to materialize. Half a day's sail from Longso Meadow, the port of St. Anthony. A chance to replenish the Dagmar On's stores. Water, diesel and food are taken on board.
Brent! Okay, shut off the water!
There is always maintenance work to be done on a sailing boat, especially on a veteran like this. Today, the rigging gets a protective coating.
This is blacking, a mixture of wood tar and linseed oil, 100% natural. The hemp soaks up the oil and tar mixture, which makes it water resistant and impervious to salty air. Blacking is great for the ropes, but not for the person who has to apply it.
An unexpected delicacy has found its way on board.
Some guys came in a couple of hours ago on the boat next to ours, Lady Christa, and they brought a whole sack of these crabs. They taste really good in a salad with a bit of mayonnaise, some nice bread and a drop of white wine.
Rich fishing grounds attracted European settlers to Newfoundland as long ago as the 17th century. Even today, the fisheries industry is one of the most important branches of the economy. But in the 1990s, fish stocks collapsed due to overfishing. A wide-ranging fishing ban was imposed, a quota system that threatened the livelihoods of many small fishermen. They feel the system places them at an unfair disadvantage to industrial fishing fleets.
We're not in, they just want to get rid of we. We're inshore fishermen and they don't want that, see? He wants the bigger boats out there.
With the big boats out there, they tears up the bottoms and everything, and they destroys it all, and then the fish got nowhere to lay their eggs or nothing and that. So, what can we do about it? They gives it all to the fishery, to the big boats and nothing else.
Today, the catch is closely monitored by the State Fisheries Board.
They should be strung up. That's what they should be done with. See, the reason they're well, half of them big boats, well, the government has loans for them, eh? And now the government got to give them money to give them the fish to get the money back on the boats.
The rules protecting cod are particularly strict, and halibut is allowed to be caught on only 1 day a year. With the advent of industrial fishing in the 20th century, fish stocks were depleted faster than they could recover. What's more, bottom trawling destroyed fish nurseries. The industry sailed towards disaster with eyes wide open. In 1992, the Canadian government slammed on emergency brakes. Far too late. 30,000 fishermen suddenly found themselves out of work. The lovingly decorated fishing boats in the harbour at St. Anthony's bear witness to a proud seafaring past. But the fish are gone, and no one knows if they'll ever come back. On the way to its next destination, the Dagmar Orn's sails are filled by a 20-knot northwesterly wind. Everyone on board enjoys the sun and the peace and quiet when the ship is propelled by wind alone. Sailing gives Peter Fleischer a sense of freedom. Before he started with Arvid Fuchs, he worked as a dental technician.
There came a point at around the age of 40 when I started thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was in a job that I no longer enjoyed and realised I was only waiting for something else to come along. But I wanted to do more than just wait. I had a sailing licence and I thought to myself, I could go sailing. I'll buy a sailing boat. But when I went to Hamburg to have a look at one, I realised I didn't know enough about them. So I decided to look for someone who did. I knew that Arvid lived near Hamburg and I went to see him. And I actually caught him at home. But instead of asking what sort of boat I should buy, I asked if I could work on his projects. To that he replied, perhaps we can get acquainted. Everyone works together on our projects. He then said there was always lots to do on the ship, which was currently in dock for repair at Egersund in Denmark. If I liked, I could go there and start straight away. So I put together a bit of gear, drove to Egersund and started work. After 10 minutes, I looked as if I'd been working for 100 hours, totally filthy, but happy. That was more than 5 years ago, and I'm still here. It was a good decision.
gute Entscheidung.
On the west coast of Newfoundland is one of the most stunning protected areas in Canada, Gros Morne National Park. The Dagmar Orne is moored at Rocky Harbour, a small town in the middle of the park. There's a marine biology research station here. As an authority on polar regions, Arvid Fuchs is enthusiastically welcomed by scientists Joe Wroblewski and Jennifer Hoffman. They're taking a group of students out today to check the fish population at the mouth of a mountain river. As at any centre of Arctic research, the dominant topic here is global warming.
The last time it was that extreme was in 1892, and so it was a very, very warm winter. And so the warm, moist atmosphere was essentially preventing any formation of sea ice along the Labrador coast. The local people use snowmobiles to get around. They usually can do this all winter long, and this last winter there was only a 2-week period where they could use the snowmobiles over the frozen ocean.
So same situation in Greenland as well. So some areas have never frozen up really. So our boat was frozen in because it was a bay, but the settlement itself, so they still use dog teams. They couldn't use their dog teams at all, and finally they're trying to get rid of the dogs because they have to feed it. So it's also a cultural thing. So because they're losing these old skills nowadays.
A fence in the South Brook River interferes with fish migration and leads them into a trap. Several times during its lifetime, the Atlantic salmon returns from the open sea to breed in the river where it was born. The traps are checked daily and the fish released. Most of the students here today have never seen salmon outside the supermarket.
One multi-sea salmon, and the others are grills, and there's a couple of trout.
Last year's records show that salmon numbers are dwindling.
Yeah, it's more than 63. Oh my God, it's more than the length of it.
What is the reason for the decline of the fish population?
Main reasons the salmon populations were in trouble was a combination of commercial fishery, like fishing the adults at sea, and also habitat loss or destruction, just pollution, and loss of freshwater habitat for the juveniles.
I learned that it's much more fragile than we ever thought it was, and it's not something you can just add more to the system and expect it to recover. It really, there's so many interplaying parts that you can't just expect something we can do to fix it. It's really, you have to take care of it before it gets bad, or else it can't sustain itself the way we're doing it right now. So.
Farther upstream, the students set about hunting for juveniles, which are stunned with a mild electric current and collected in nets.
Because sometimes they just up against. Can you move up? They move up right beside them.
I think they might be all salmon. Yeah, that was definitely salmon. Come on, wake up. I believe that's an Atlantic salmon.
You all right?
This one is. Yeah, they're all back to normal now.
Come back in.
Yeah. So.
Switch your hand around and get lots of oxygen.
So this one here is the brook trout, and
He's not very happy in here, but take a quick look at the white leading edge. Okay. Okay. Yeah, take him and look at him really quickly, and then we'll release him.
The two, well, they all look kind of golden, but the one here, and they got red dots on their sides, and that one, those are just different ages of par.
For the crew of the Dagmar Orn, it's time to move on.
So we're gonna set the sails in the harbor here. So we should untie the sails and get everything ready. And yeah, we still have the first reef in, and we will take it out. So it's not much wind today.
All reefs out?
Yes.
Okay.
The Dagmar Orn leaves Gros Morne Park, bound for Corner Brook. Sailing conditions are perfect for the 80-mile trip. The destination is a day's sail away. The industrial town of Corner Brook is not a place the crew want to make for, but there was nowhere in northern Newfoundland for them to enter Canada officially. Here they get a visit from customs.
Yes, okay, so, yeah, right. We'll be waiting for you. We're tied up at the Coast Guard dock, just beside the Coast Guard cutter, and we'll be waiting for you. Okay, fine, yeah, thanks.
And these crew sail with you often? Do they?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, good crew?
Yeah, excellent.
Okay. No, you got the right guy.
Yeah. So that's unfortunately in German.
Yeah, okay,
a lot of pictures so you can see how we were built it. And we've done a lot of travel in the Arctic. It was after a wet and windy passage.
Mm-hmm. Because normally we would, thank you.
Yeah.
Normally we would, you would see it at St. Anthony. I guess with customs we like to be the ones to do the
I understand that, absolutely. Yeah.
I would think that he's already been admitted into Canada.
Yeah.
So we'll have
just checking.
Sometimes the authorities present a greater challenge than anything in nature. Fortunately, the stopover in Corner Brook was only brief. Time to say goodbye to Newfoundland, although not for long. The Dagmar Orn will be back in 3 weeks, when it'll head up the east coast and make one last stop before crossing the Atlantic. For the crew, the extraordinarily sunny weather was one of the biggest surprises Newfoundland had to offer. It normally rains a lot here in summer, and the island is enveloped in mist. But now it's as if Newfoundland wants to show it has another face. The weather forecast is not good. Arvid Fuchs checks the winds forecast for early Sunday morning and finds they're going to get fairly strong. He reckons the best course of action at the moment is to hug the coast for a while and then look for an update later. Humpback whales draw close to the Dagmar Orn. Up to 18 metres long, these whales are frequently seen in coastal waters, out of the water. The strong wind comes up faster than expected, reaching gale force 7. Blowing from the southeast, it hits the boat almost head-on. The sails are taken in. In a sea like this, it's not possible to sail close to the wind.
Pretty difficult sailing, and the sea is probably going to get a lot rougher in the next few hours, so it'll be hard to make headway. We're wondering whether to shelter in one of the small bays for the night and wait for the wind to die down.
So they can then proceed to Newfoundland's cheerful and charming sister, Nova Scotia, 100 nautical miles farther south.